Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Sven and I hope you're doing great. Let's talk about lookup tables and how to test them. Because if you use LUTs, you want to make sure that they don't break or introduce artifacts, and you only notice that in the middle of a job. And don't worry, I'm not gonna sell you any LUT packages in this video. So why do we still use LUTs? LUTs or lookup tables are not only useful for transforming a log image to a display linear state in a camera or for previewing purposes. LUTs can also define the look of a show. Usually, nowadays we separate LUTs into two parts, applying a look and converting a color space. While the latter should usually be done with a color space transform or color management instead, we should focus on look LUTs in this video that only apply creative color manipulation. They don't convert color spaces, but it is still important to know in which color space they should be used. Sometimes people put a comment in the LUT itself. If we open it up with a text editor, which we totally can, it's just a text file, we can find this comment. Another way would be to ask the person who created them, if that's possible. If you can't find any information about it, this is your first indicator that the LUT may not be of the highest quality. And by the way, there are different file formats for LUTs such as Cube, 3DL or CTF, and they are mostly doing the same thing, but because we're focusing on DaVinci Resolve, we will only look at Cube files in this video. So assume that you know how LUTs work, but for those of you who don't, a LUT is basically a table that expects certain input values and contains corresponding output values. It remaps the incoming colors to specific colors based on the content of this table, and all the data that lies in between those two values simply gets interpolated. In order to improve the quality of this interpolation, we make sure that the method used is set to tetrahedral in the project settings. When we use a LUT as a look-defining element in our grade, we should make sure that it is of the highest possible quality and that it doesn't introduce artifacts or other problems when using it. The most common problems you will find with low-quality LUTs are extreme clamping, banding, huge increase of noise, and chroma clipping on saturated colors. Because we don't want to find those when we already used a LUT on 500 shots before, we should check it with all sorts of test footage before we even start using it. The most common way to test a LUT for problems is to apply it on a grayscale ramp. Here we can see problems with the contrast rendering and with weird color tints in the shadows and highlights. DaVinci Resolve has a grayscale ramp generator here under Effects in the Edit page, but we have to make it a compound clip in order to access it in the color page as well. This LUT, for example, flips the highlights upside down, which will not look good on actual footage. Also, this LUT contains both look adjustment and color space conversion, so it shouldn't be used as well as we discussed earlier. And sometimes you can find bumps like this one. Yes, we can see the extreme red tint, which is obviously not great, but also there are some strong steps in the brightness rendering of this LUT that are terrible. A second method is to look at this hue ramp test pattern. A badly designed LUT will destroy the smooth transitions between the colors and create noticeable edges that can't be fixed afterwards. And we can see those here in the vector scope as well. This image, for example, is really handy and shows us color gradients at different brightness stages. You can easily spot issues in the color transitions here, and a link to that image is in the video description. These images by ARRI give you a nice overview of how the look translates to well-exposed images, and you can find them in the video description as well. A well-designed LUT should not change the exposure of the image drastically. Of course, when it affects contrast, it also alters the brightness in a way, so on a dark image it might push it a bit too far down and you need to compensate for that on a clip level. However, for a well-balanced clip, a LUT should not move the exposure too much, and we can easily test this with pictures like these. The most advanced technique to test a LUT would be to look at it in 3D space. After all, colors are three-dimensional. They consist of 3 color channels, red, green and blue, and some problems can only be seen in a 3D representation. For that we have to enter the Fusion page and apply the LUT on a specific test pattern. And if you're new to the Fusion page, don't worry, this is really simple. So first of all, we drag a Fusion composition into the Edit page and open this one in the Fusion page. Then in our node graph, we create this node by clicking Shift and Spacebar, and then we type in LUT Cube Creator. Now we connect the output of this node to the media out that is already selected. Now in the viewer, we right click and select View 3D Histogram, and this creates our cube. Now any adjustment that we do in the Fusion page will be reflected in this cube. So if we load up a LUT, we can see how it behaves. With this LUT, for example, we can see chroma clipping for the highly saturated colors. After all, we don't want to test our LUTs only on test patterns. Yes, they are great, but we should also look at real footage, of course. For this, you should create yourself a library of footage that you already know. Go through all of your projects and take some of the shots that you remember being tricky to work with. And whenever you work on a show and you find a clip that is problematic, take a note, write it down and save it in the library for later use. So when you do that, make sure that you balance the clip before applying the LUT. But also try out how far you can push it before the LUT introduces problems, because sometimes it's just the creative intent to push the white balance way off, and the LUT shouldn't break when you do that. So as you can see, making sure that a LUT is built with minimal flaws is extremely important. A lot of LUTs that you can find online are not tested properly, and you should be really careful when buying them, because they can produce issues that you can't fix later. And if they are unusable, you just wasted your money. Hey, if you found this video helpful, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And also let me know in the comments below if you have any other ways to test your LUTs. So until then, I will see you in the next episode.